December 5th, 2025. I was preparing to go see the second FNaF movie, so I was fully decked out in a FNaF shirt and the wristband and security badge that both came from the Ticket to Fun kit. Before the movie, I went to Popeyes and got myself the Freddy Fazbear meal, which was pretty much just chicken tenders, fries, and a biscuit. It was a pretty standard meal, and it tasted great. Funnily enough, my order number was 183, and 1983 is an important year in FNaF. So then I head to the theater, and I'm about to order the popcorn, but the guy behind the register stops me and compliments my shirt. So then I show off my badge and wristband, which he thought were really cool. Before I ordered the food, he told me he saw the movie already, loved it, and told me to stay until the very end of the credits. He was a really nice guy. I got my popcorn, headed into the theater, and sat down to watch Five Nights at Freddy's 2. I saw the movie in theaters with my brother and my girlfriend, yeah, I have a girlfriend by the way, on the day that it came out. In this video, I'll be giving you guys my full review of the movie, my opinion on the theater experience, the story, the visuals, and how it stacks up against the first one. This will not be the only video I make about the movie though. In the near future, I plan on making an entire video dedicated to all the Easter eggs I noticed, the theories I have, and the connections to different areas of the series and how it sets up great potential for the sequel. This review will be full of spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie yet and just want to know my thoughts, I already released a YouTube short of my non-spoiler review, so come back after you see the movie if you haven't yet, and now, without further ado, let's get started. My absolute favorite part of the first FNaF movie was the theater experience. I could tell I was in a room full of FNaF fans, especially considering the people wearing FNaF shirts and hats and other merch. During so many scenes of the movie, people cheered, and the audience was actually engaged. I'm not sure why, but my theater this time around wasn't nearly as full, and it wasn't nearly as receptive. There were a few muted claps for Corey, but besides that, the audience was honestly kind of boring. I do love the first movie, but the theater experience was the best part, and unfortunately, I didn't get much of that with this one. Before anything else though, we need to get this out of the way now. Every single animatronic in this movie looks incredible. All the toys, all the wizards, and the surprise circus baby looked absolutely amazing. Honestly, even better than the first movie. The animatronics and sets in the first movie were great, but this movie somehow knocked it even farther out of the park. I like the wizards especially, all of them looking very faithful and just translating incredibly well to the big screen. I also love that they were actually faithful in some ways to the FNaF 2 gameplay, all being fooled by the Freddy mask except Foxy. That whole sequence where Mike is just basically playing FNaF 2 was really cool. In the games, the wizards were the animatronics used at the first Freddy's location, being kept for spare parts in the FNaF 2 location, and then being repaired and redesigned for FNaF 1. Basically in the games, the wizards and the classics are the same animatronics, but in this movie, they are not at all. The wizards are just prototypes from the first Freddy's, ones that never actually got the chance to perform on stage and that were only used for spare parts and literally nothing else. When the toy animatronics go out to kill people, the wizards are used as the backup plan, the failsafe in case someone tries to deactivate the toys. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like their existence is just really weird. Like, if they're prototypes, that means they were never on stage. So were they the first iterations of the Core 4 that just got replaced by the toys before Freddy's ever even opened? Or did they just build these prototypes specifically for parts? That's not a criticism, just a question. But if they are meant to be prototypes exclusively built for parts, that makes no sense, because if they're meant to be spare parts for the toys, they should be designed to look like the toys. Overall, I'm just not a really big fan of how they're used here. It's kind of like how in the Resident Evil movies, Nemesis does kill the STARS members like he was made to do in the games, but his purpose in the movie has nothing to do with that. That's kind of how the wizards are here. They act like they do in the FNaF 2 gameplay, but they do so for completely different reasons than they do there. Next, I want to talk about the characters. I think everything with Vanessa's trauma with Afton actually works really well. That whole scene with her running away from Afton and coming across Circus Baby was actually really engaging, and I thought that was really well done. But that subplot is never really concluded. The movie kind of just forgets about it for the entire second half up until when Michael shows up. I do like it, I just wish they did more with it. All the Abby stuff works really well too. I think both Vanessa and Abby are very good natural progressions of their characters from the first movie. That's not to say Mike's plot isn't a natural progression, but his role in the story is a lot more minimal. Mike is supposed to be the main character, but he feels kinda sidelined in this movie, and Vanessa feels a lot more like the main character. He has a role in the story, yeah, but he didn't really have any sort of character development. He was kinda just there. And what's weird is that they decided to change something major from the games. Mike Schmidt is Michael Afton in the games, and in the movies, although it didn't really seem like that was going to be the case, it didn't really feel like there would be Michael Afton at all. It just felt like Mike Schmidt would be the Michael Afton equivalent for the movie, but that's not the case. They decide to throw Michael Afton himself into the mix, and then decide to make him evil. A big problem I have with this is how it's changing people's beliefs about the games. In the games, Mike and Michael are the same character, and Michael Afton is the hero of the series. In this movie, they're two separate characters, and Michael is a villain. This is what people have been calling Mike-tosis, obviously a play on mitosis, and it's already doing damage to theorizing. Because although I do think some things from the movies can be used for the games, this was deliberately a change, not a hint, and some people are taking this as a hint for the games. On top of that, Michael's role in the movie is just odd. The problem with Mike-tosis mostly stems from the fact that both Mike and Michael had very little to do in the movie, so having them be two different people in the movie just seems pointless and makes both of them even less valuable to the story. This is especially true considering Michael was just there to continue his father's legacy, but he didn't really do anything in the movie to contribute to that goal. He is helping Charlotte, a character who was killed by Afton. Those are two goals which don't go together very well, because it can very easily backfire. What if Charlotte decides to go after Michael? He's not really doing anything to help his father's legacy, he's just helping one of his victims possibly go against him. Michael's association with Charlotte and him setting her free just doesn't really make much sense. You'd think Charlotte would be working against Afton, but instead she goes around trying to murder people who didn't pay attention to her, and the son of the man who killed her is basically an ally for some reason? Or maybe they're not allies, it's honestly not clear what their association is. Michael is also not really needed to help Charlotte, outside of just letting the ghost hunters in, and I feel like they could have just had them break in instead. Michael could be cut completely from this movie, and not only would the story still make sense, it would make more sense and cause less confusion. I honestly feel like the only reason they had Michael Afton in this movie was to dismiss the theories that Mike Schmidt isn't Afton in the movies, and to make it so that Mike and Vanessa can be in a relationship and avoid a Star Wars situation. Also for fan service. So yeah, I just didn't like Michael Afton that much in the movie. Maybe they'll do him better in the third movie, but in this one I wasn't a fan. My distaste also extends to Charlotte. A lot of people, including some of my friends, really like her in this movie, but honestly, I just didn't. Like, I didn't hate her at all. I liked her motivations, being mad at the adults for not helping her, that's fine. I'm cool with her being an antagonist. The problem is, she wasn't just an antagonist, she's straight up a villain. She doesn't even care about Michael trying to continue her killer's legacy, at least not in this movie. I think, although it is cliche, the movie could have benefited from a not all adults are the same scene, leading to her changing her ways. But, of course, this movie ends on a massive cliffhanger. This is very clearly part 2 of 3. The story isn't complete yet. I see it kind of as the MCU Spider-Man movies, in that they're all the origin of the Spider-Man we know and love, but they're not that great as individual stories for the character when it comes to the Iron Man stuff, because this isn't the version of Spider-Man that we know and love yet. It's kinda like that, where this movie has an unfaithful version of Charlotte, but it's not a complete story, and the next movie might change her to be the Charlotte we know, possibly using Vanessa's body to go against Afton. Movies like Batman v Superman also do something similar, where Batman is no longer the version of the character we know from the comics, and Superman is not yet the version of the character we know from the comics, but the future movies would develop them and bring them to become those versions of the characters. But obviously those stories were never finished because the universe sucked. Point is, it's an ongoing story, so maybe I will like the final product. I'm just not a huge fan of it as of now, and we'll have to wait and see. The toy animatronics in this movie are honestly used in a pretty creative way, tricking Abby into thinking the originals just got new bodies, when in reality it's just the puppet controlling them. I think the action and the jump scares with them are all really cool, especially the mangled car sequence, but I really wish there was more of it. In the first movie, the animatronics are kids being manipulated by their killer, so I like that they had them murder people for Afton, and then be cute and cuddly with Abby. It was a nice juxtaposition which kinda made them feel more eerie that they could flip-flop like that, and it's true to their characters. But with this movie, not so much. The animatronics in this movie are only controlled by Charlotte, and they are actively trying to kill people. But there's not nearly enough actual animatronic murder in this movie. There's some kills at the beginning of the movie with the Ghost Hunter crew, but besides that, they only kill like one person, and pretty much everyone else survives the animatronic attacks. There was a good amount of action, but not enough actual killing. That wouldn't be a problem if the drama in the movie was more fleshed out, but like I said earlier, Vanessa's drama is kind of abandoned like halfway through the movie until the final act. It would have been cool if her trauma hindered her more throughout, but instead it kind of just disappears, and it disappears when the stakes are higher and where her trauma would actually be a much bigger deal, and I think that's just a big missed opportunity. I just feel like because there's 3 times as many animatronics in the movie, there should be at least a couple more murders. Maybe that's just me though. I think my biggest issue with this movie though, is the story itself and how it all flows together. I already talked about how I'm not a fan of Michael and Charlotte, and they're literally the basis for the film, so already I have big issues with the plot. But whereas the first movie had a plot that, if you ask me, was pretty easy to understand even if you're not a FNaF fan, considering it's quite literally all directly explained to you, this movie is kind of all over the place, especially towards the end, and then it just ends abruptly. The pacing was a bit wonky, and the structure of the plot ended up being really bloated and compact in some parts. Like the ending, it's just not very evenly distributed. On top of that, there's a bunch of plot holes in the movie that a lot of people have been pointing out recently. Here's a few that I personally noticed. Recently, I made a video on the FNaF movie novel, and there's strangely a couple things that don't line up with this movie. First, it is heavily implied that Aunt Jane actually died, and this plotline isn't followed in this movie. Instead, she survives and tells everyone about the killer animatronics, and everyone just thinks she's insane. That's fine, because the novel was based on an earlier version of the script, so I don't have a problem with it not lining up. But what doesn't make sense about that is the fact that even if what she says sounds crazy, the fact that Mike started working at Freddy's, people died at Freddy's, Jane got attacked by an animatronic, and then Freddy's got destroyed, all at the same time in the span of 5 days should definitely get Mike investigated. Also, what she says shouldn't even be that far-fetched. The yellow rabbit animatronic was seen by Charlotte, and she saved the kid who was captured by him, so he should be public knowledge. A killer animatronic should be public knowledge. So what Jane says should not sound that crazy, and Mike should either not have custody of Abby, or he should be under investigation. On top of that, now that the toy animatronics are wreaking havoc, if Mike still keeps custody of Abby and Aunt Jane is still seen as crazy, that would make no sense. Speaking of Charlotte though, that whole thing also makes no sense. The opening scene of this movie is easily the best part, but what doesn't make sense is the fact that it is believed to be an accident. So let's just break this down. A kid gets lured by the yellow rabbit, and Charlotte yells for help, but no one helps. Then she vanishes, and then reappears with the kid the yellow rabbit took. This kid is alive, and he would remember being taken by the yellow rabbit, and Charlotte has 3 knife wounds in the back. And somehow, they believe this was all an accident? Any police investigation would easily show that the yellow rabbit took this kid, Charlotte rescued him, and then that yellow rabbit stabbed her in the back. This is murder, not an accident. Who knows, maybe the police are just corrupt or completely lazy here, but I think it would be universally accepted by the public that this was murder, not an accident. Henry should not have suspicions, he should know for a fact. Also, he says himself that he realized when the missing kids died that it was murder, but did the police not? In the games and the books, it's well known that William Afton killed the missing kids, but they can't prove it because they didn't find the dead bodies. However, if that is the case in the movies, then Afton should be in prison. If they know the Yellow Rabbit is Afton, and if they know that the Yellow Rabbit was there when Charlotte was killed, and if they know the Yellow Rabbit lured the missing kids away, then Afton should be convicted for Charlotte's death, whether he's convicted for the missing kids at all anyway. I don't know, that just feels like a plot hole, but obviously the movies might have had Afton's involvement be unknown. One other thing I noticed was that because Mike Schmidt is 25 in the first movie, and was 12 when Garrett died, that means Garrett died in 1987, because the movie takes place in 2000. And because Vanessa already had Garrett's toy plane in the photo with Spring Bonnie, that picture has to be after 1987. So why does she look the same age in 1987 that she does in 1982? The timing there just doesn't make sense. There's a couple more plot holes some people have pointed out, like why Henry didn't just give the music box to Charlotte himself, but I think that can be written off as him just not wanting to go back inside that place for emotional reasons. Overall, I just think this movie's plot is a little nonsensical in some aspects, but that's just the thing. As a FNaF fan, I'm here to see how the lore of the games is similar or different, but most importantly, I'm here to have fun. And that's exactly what this movie is. It's a whole lot of fun. There's so many Easter eggs and references throughout this thing, like Toy Freddy's fat fingers being a reference to his voice line from Ultimate Custom Night, where he explains why we need to play the video game for him.
It's not my fault. I have these fat plastic fingers and can't press the buttons.
There's Charlotte directly quoting her own voice line from that game too.
I don't hate you, but you need to stay out of my way.
There's Chica losing her beak like she does in FNaF 2, which is also an important lore detail Scott pointed out years ago. There's Shadow Bonnie appearing in the office. There's the ghost hunters being called spectral scoopers, a reference to the scooper from Sister Location. There's the ending teasing not only FNaF 3 for the next movie, but even FNaF 6, something I was not expecting at all. In the near future, like I said, I'll be doing a video talking about all the Easter eggs that I personally noticed my first time watching, as well as a couple others that people have been talking about recently, and I'll be talking about theories, the ending, and where we're going next. My point is, this movie was completely made for the fans. This is something you must have heard everyone saying, and it's true, but honestly, that's almost to a fault. While it makes the movie a good time for most fans, even the ones who think the movie sucks, it kind of alienates the general audience. Yeah, the movie is made for the fans, but I feel like it should also be more newcomer friendly. People who watch this movie should be able to understand this story. I think the first movie is very much understandable, and outside of it being a bit uneventful for a little while in the first act, I don't really understand why critics hated the movie so much. I don't think it's the greatest movie of all time, but I don't think it was bad by any means. Unfortunately, this movie isn't like that. This movie is very much a fun ride, but it's not really a horror movie the general audience can enjoy. There's definitely some scary aspects like the Charlotte possession stuff, but most of the scare factor just comes from the jump scares. There's not a lot of scenes that are genuinely tense. Yes, this movie was made for the fans, which is why there's so much lore and so many jump scares packed in, but while stuff like the old animatronics returning and doing some Mortal Kombat finishers on the toys was an incredibly fun ride, it was very silly. It's in the same vein as the fort scene in the first movie, where it makes sense for the characters and matches some media from the games and the books, but fans will either love it or hate it, and people who aren't fans will probably just think it's dumb. What I'm trying to say is, I don't get why critics hated the first movie as much as they did, but with this movie, I can kinda see why. I love the movie, but I wouldn't say it's good, it's just fun. It's like the Minecraft movie, though I will say this movie is definitely better. But that was my full review on Five Nights at Freddy's 2. I've been thinking a lot about this movie over the past few days since it came out, and this review really ended up being longer than I expected because I just kept thinking of new things to say. In a few days, maybe I'll have more to say, though obviously I'm not going to make another video on this. Anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed. If you did, leave a like and subscribe if you want to. Hopefully you guys don't take this as me dissing the movie, because although I have a lot of problems with it and honestly think it's a pretty bad movie, it's an incredibly fun time, and I like it just as much, if not more, than the first one. Like I've said, I'm going to make another video on the Easter eggs and theories and stuff, so stay tuned for that. I also have a couple theory videos about the games that this movie has inspired me to make. They won't really be about the movie, but I will talk about the movie in them, so stay tuned for those as well, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye guys!